We are so excited to welcome our guest today, Clifford Hudson, who spent 35 years in different roles at Sonic Corp, franchisor of the Sonic drive-in concept, and 23 of those years as chief executive officer, leading the enterprise on a steep climb from 880 million to 4.5 billion system-wide sales during his tenure. And for over 65 years, Sonic turned cars into private dining rooms. And during the pandemic in 2020, they were perfectly positioned to hit the fast lane and grow double-digit same-store sales. And the strategic foundation that Cliff built preceded this miraculous climb and positioned the business to lead through a global crisis that took other businesses out for good. And now Cliff is in a new career chapter, and he's a leading voice in business leadership, helping executive leaders scale enterprises with confidence. And we are so excited to dive more into all of the stories there in that incredible career.
Well, Cliff, welcome to Listen Loudly, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
So just to start, you're doing a lot. You've always got a lot of plates spinning, but everything that's in your life, professionally, personally, what's giving you the most energy right now? What do you wake up most excited about?
I wake up most excited about everything I'm doing. The variety.
Good answer.
The variety.
Yeah.
The variety is what keeps me going, frankly. It's what always kept me going, and it does now. I've got a couple of boards I serve on, and I'm very involved in the planning for those organizations. Couple of nonprofit boards, I should say, which I'm very involved in the planning for those organizations. One for-profit board I'm serving on. As you know, a book that I'm working on with my former chief information officer, Craig Miller. A significant real estate project with my sons that is a 1940s Art Deco building that we're renovating in a historical fashion. Anyway, life is full, and I enjoy all these endeavors.
That's fantastic. You do have a lot going on. It sounds like that's always been kind of
It's always been the
to
case.
stay busy.
One board member said if he were going to depict my schedule and behavior, he would just hire a juggler. And I've always found that the juggling makes life more interesting.
Well, you've always called yourself a master of none, which is the title of your first book. And you've also called yourself an accidental CEO. So I'd love to know more about that, and how did being a generalist benefit your career path? And then even for our listeners, how would you encourage them to embrace the art of becoming a master of none as well? It's interesting.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting, my path into business, because I really figured business was the least likely path for me. As an undergraduate in college, I studied history. I decided rather than staying in history that I would go to law school, just because I saw law as creating any number of paths. I saw people in my community who practiced law, or they went into politics, they went into government, they went into business, they went into education, all of these things with law degrees. So as a 15, 16-year-old, literally my high school girlfriend, her dad was a lawyer, and he was doing a lot of these things. So my thought was, this looks pretty good. So I headed off into that path. And even as it relates to Sonic then, how did the generalist piece, you might say, aid me? I went into it. I know of people who went into that business at Sonic, and I think all businesses, with the expectation, I want to be a CEO. I got to prepare this way. Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of ways they kind of get a little aggressive or heightened expectations, worrying about this promotion, that promotion. I didn't do that. I didn't anticipate being CEO. As an example, we had a chance to buy the company. The company was not in that great a shape at that moment. It had gone through some tough times. So did I jump up and try to be aggressive and so on? No, I invested as little as I could to keep my job. The company didn't look that great at the time. It quickly turned around and looked very different. But the point is that theme, I think, over my first 6, 8, even 10 years with the company, I jumped into challenges that presented themselves without expectation of job change or even remuneration change. Mm-hmm. And the consequence was I learned the business, and I got a real big education. And you might even say, in terms of different areas of the business, I had an exceptional apprenticeship for that 10-year period to learn the business. To be blunt, few expectations in terms of producing in one area of business or another. I just learned the business. After 8 years with the company, I was moved from general counsel to CFO. Told my boss I was leaving the company, and he said, "No, don't do that. Stay here and be chief operating officer." So that really formally moved me into a business guy, you might say. And but at that point, I had 9+ years of experience with the company and very, very involved in strategy and planning and so on. I felt more comfortable moving into, you might say, a more formal business, still not specialty. I mean, I was running the company, so I had, again, all this juggling. But I just, by describing my path, I guess I'm trying to say to others, particularly young people, don't be so fixed and narrow and with a belief that you're going to, you need to specialize and just go down a narrow path. My path of a generalist meant that I got to just learn the company broadly, eventually run the company unexpectedly.
Yeah, that's profound. And I mean, you said you became a business guy. You had other interests, even music, so many different passions that you had. And it is interesting, just personally, as I've heard your story now for years and walked closely with you for the past couple of years, and just getting that story out so that more young people like me, aspiring leaders, can glean from that knowledge. But I think it's interesting to hear, just to stay open. And it's not always that you had this target in your mind and knew that over the course of a couple of decades you would be guiding an enterprise at the level that you were. But each opportunity, you were there, present, learning, and staying open. And that's a profound lesson for anyone to absorb and to apply to their career.
Well, it worked for mine. So hopefully, and that's really the only advice I can give is what worked for me. And it did. And part of that was the particular circumstance, and everybody's got their own circumstance. They have to figure that out. But I do think patience and embracing variety is a good developmental thing within a company, but it's also a good life thing to embrace diversity and, learn as much as you can about a lot of different things.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you've had so many different chapters, and I want to shift gears to zoom in a little bit on one of the particular chapters that you had in your career at Sonic, which Sonic is famous for its iconic commercials. And our audience will remember the two guys and its unconventional approach to advertising, which was a game changer for the brand at the time. That was during your tenure, and you were at the forefront of guiding the brand and making those marketing decisions. And so I'd love to understand your philosophy really about how that moment in time kind of catapulted the brand into a wider national stage, and specifically your philosophy around marketing and how it can drive a business forward in the way that it did for Sonic.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Marketing is a big part of any retail or restaurant business, and getting people to have your brand top of mind when they decide when it's time to get a meal or a snack or whatever it is. I think it's fair to say, first of all, as it relates to a marketing strategy, and it's not just a marketing strategy, it's also then a business strategy. We looked years ago at questions about the Sonic brand and how do we want to move the brand forward in terms of customer perception about us. Many of our competitors were very focused on discounting and 99 cent this, $1.19 that. And while we couldn't ignore price, we decided that we also couldn't compete on price with McDonald's, Burger King, etc. But we are perfect for focusing on differentiation. This kind of goes back to Harvard Business School professor Michael Porter and his Porter's quadrants, and the view that there are these tensions between product or service differentiation on the one hand, price on the other, and you got to figure out which one is yours. If you try to play in both areas, try to differentiate your service and you're the cheapest, you're probably going to fail. And so you really have to drive one or the other. Our drive was to move towards differentiation. Product service differentiation couldn't be insensitive to price. It was a natural for Sonic. Why? Because it's a 50 Styles drive-in. It was the only one like that. So you push out along a spectrum of differentiation. What else does that entail? Well, product. You're not going to talk about fries. You're going to talk about tater tots, or you're going to talk about freshly breaded onion rings. We were a natural for drinks in the afternoon. So what do? We had happy hour. We promoted happy hour, 2 to 4 half price drinks. So all of this was geared towards differentiation. That brought the two guys in fairly naturally at a point in time right around 2000 when the primary thing that had become very popular on television was reality television. And so our view was, this is what people want to see. They want to see something. I mean, it's almost voyeuristic. It's happening as you see it. So we brought in the two guys, and initially they went around and visited competitors that make wisecracks, etc. It refined over time to just becoming a focus on them in the drive-in, and it was all about the drive-in and the car hops and the made-to-order food. But again, still focusing on differentiation. So we rode that horse for a long time, if you don't mind the euphemism. I don't think they would mind the euphemism, but they rode those two horses for a long time. But I'd like to tell a quick story about, did we sufficiently fortunately appreciate that. And how did we approach that? And the quick story is, when the Great Recession hit, our business went negative. A lot of business went negative. A lot of business failed that 08, 9, 10 timeframe. To try to figure out what to do next, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. We went away from the two guys. And really in no time after doing that, I came to the conclusion that that was a big mistake. That was in January of 12. It was in the fall of 11. I made a decision, a big mistake. And in January 12, I literally called the two guys and said, will you come back? The blonde-haired guy, TJ, on the phone when I called him, he said, you bet. When do we start? Dark-haired guy, Pete, he was like, well, let me think about it. I was like, come on, Pete. And he said, well, let me think about it. So I called him again the next day and he said, okay, I'll do it. He just wanted, I think he likes to process these things in that way. And he said he wanted to talk to his wife. But the fact is they're making great full-time income for very part-time work. But the point is our business had gone negative. And in one market, we ran a two guys commercial after we had stopped utilizing them. And in that market, sales shot up as opposed to all the other markets. And we said, okay, we got to get these guys back. We called them in January. We were filming in February, and I think at the end of February, we had them back on national television. It made all the difference in the world. That was February, March 2012. We were around until, I would say, 2019 at some point when the folks that bought the company decided to move away from them. They were perfect because of the emphasizing the drive-in. They were perfect because of their fun lightheartedness. They were perfect because you could start a commercial with the two guys, and everybody knew it was Sonic. So we could promote all these various day parts, all these various products. We could have a wide variety of what we were promoting, but we started every commercial with the two guys. And so we got 100% recognition because of that campaign, because of those two individuals. So it was a wonderful campaign that I was very thankful for and very appreciative of their talent and willingness to engage.
Cliff, they were improv actors, right? Weren't they?
When we hired them, that was their base, was improv. They had both been on Second City Comedy Group in Second City Comedy Group in Chicago. The blonde-haired guy, TJ, he continued with that for years. The dark-haired guy kind of moved out a little bit, tried to do more writing and acting and so on. But I think TJ's involved in, last time I talked to him, it was during the pandemic. And actually he said, the pandemic may cause him to choose a new career. Kind of hard to do stand up before a crowd when you got no crowds.
I appreciate brands that will stick with something that works and just, and I think there's a tendency to move on or get bored.
Marketing folks in particular are anxious to move on even before it's time to move on.
But as you said, you threw the baby out with the bathwater because it was the economic headwinds were coming and it was a tough time. Yep. There was just to segue on that, another milestone in your career from what we've read about was during the global pandemic. I mean, that's a time when a lot of businesses like the 09, 2010 timeframe you were talking about, but during the pandemic, I mean, all kinds of challenges across the board for businesses, but you didn't just, tread water. You actually grew substantially. Yep. And that I think we want to hear about, but maybe more specifically is something called Integrated Customer Experience, or ICE, which is an initiative that you really spearheaded while at Sonic. Yep. How did that affect positive results during that time?
Well, to be clear, by the time the pandemic hit, I was no longer with the company. An affiliate of Rourke Capital, Inspire Brands, bought the company in 2018, December. So the very end, it literally was December of 2018. So 2019, 2020, it was their, quote, baby, you might say. The elements of ICE, moving into ICE, though, were kind of threefold. One was to move money that had been more localized for advertising, move it into a national fund. And we actually negotiated that with our franchisees in 2012. And so we had it in place from 2012 forward, fourth quarter of 2012 forward, getting the money so it could be centralized and spent kind of integrated, singular fashion, which historically had not been the case. At least half the funds and sometimes more were all local dollars. One was the marketing fund. The second thing was preparation and rollout of a mobile order app so that a customer could order from anywhere, pay from anywhere, pull into the Sonic they had designated on the app and get their food, as it turned out, in less than 2 minutes, made to order meal, less than 2 minutes. That was the second phase. And the third phase that we intended to build towards was this integrated customer engagement, which really related to the totality of that engagement off premises, on premises, during order, even after the food was delivered. But the engagement with the customer in all of those phases, very kind of 21st century digital marketing strategy and helping. It was our intention to build this digital ecosystem in which we could operate with that customer and begin marketing to them very differently than we had in the 20th century. I was setting up that way to say, we got the system marketing fund done. We actually got that app done. Originally, we had hoped the app would be done in 2015, roll out 2015-16, but we decided against using an off-the-shelf product and instead built our own, which was very complex, very expensive, took a long time. And we did not roll that out until March of 2018. It was very successful. We got it rolled out in the whole system and by August of 2018. But to be blunt, with the company selling in December 2018, we literally never got the chance to populate. For the last 4 years or so, they've actually been collecting all the data we were looking forward to using. We had contracted with Amazon to store all of this and then begin manipulating, analyzing that data to build algorithms to begin marketing in that digital ecosystem. We didn't get there because the company changed hands, and the folks that bought it, I mean, I'm not really sure what, but they've either decided to go a completely different direction or they simply have yet to realize it's in their hands. So the integrated customer engagement, I think, would have been fascinating. It's not too late for them to use it. As we got into the pandemic, that exploded in Sonic's business. I mean, what we put in their lap, we rolled out in 2018. 2019, single-digit usage. I think it was 7% of sales by the time the fall arrived of 2019. But in the pandemic, their sales absolutely exploded, 21% up in 2020. And so, I mean, extraordinary explosion of the business. And customers using that mobile order, mobile pay left and right. Yep. I think by the time they got to 21, most recent reports I've heard is sales on the app, about 25% of the business. The highest percentage, some stores have as much as 45% of their sales coming in through the app. It cuts service time in half, from 4 minutes to 1 minute and 50 seconds. It's quite extraordinary. It means nobody's screwing up on the order because the customer places it and sends it in digitally. It means more rapid service. As a marketing tool, our subsequent owners really have not been utilizing it. And they may one of these days, but they've not yet. Just the mobile order, mobile pay had an extraordinary impact on the business going through the pandemic.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of companies were playing catch up in 2020, 2021 on all of that stuff, all the customer experience, some of the innovations, and you already set the table.
Well, and many of them here right now, they're talking about, we're going to innovate through our drive-through. We're going to innovate using an app. And I'm like, well, okay, welcome to the party. We did it years ago. It would have been enjoyable to be able to manage that through that process and utilize it. But Sonic was a public company. Theoretically, it was kind of for sale every day. And Rourke came in. And from the time they knocked at the door until they bought the company, they paid a 70% premium over where the stock was trading. I think our board felt like they had no choice once the bid got up that high. So it changed hands and changed management.
Well, it's an incredible story. You just gave us a peek of it, but you are spending a lot of your time right now even just capturing that story. You mentioned Craig Miller and Chief Technology Officer alongside of you who was building that strategic foundation. So you have a podcast coming out in the new year and a book of the same title, Bricks and Clicks, and it captures that untold story. So I am interested to hear as it rolls out the theme, if you will, of the importance of letting go of the conventional wisdom. You would think to build a business forward and then really transforming traditional business models so that leaders and businesses can thrive despite the continuously shifting and ever more competitive environment that they're facing. So our audience is marketing executives with what we call a challenger spirit who are showing up to change the game for the industry that they're in by stealing market share and toppling their giants. So I'd love to know that encouragement would you give to our audience to lead their team towards embracing that type of an innovative perspective?
I think that innovation is critical for all businesses. And you might ask, what is innovation? It can take a variety of forms, but as it relates to building a brand, I think the form you have to be focused on, is the consumer, the customer. The very concept of innovation that's going to be appealing to the customer, either one of product quality or convenience. And most likely, it's going to mean removing some kind of barrier that otherwise, in terms of convenience, removing some kind of barrier that otherwise kept the customer from getting it or getting it as quickly or whatever that means. In Sonic's case, that took different forms over time. One of them was a payment system to make it very easy to pay, attaching a credit card reader to the stall. What do we call that? We call it Pays. P-A-Y-S, pay at your stall. That was enormously popular with consumers. 20 years ago, Sonic got 95% of business in cash. I'm told between the app and the credit cards, 85% of their business is not cash. 85% is either the app or credit card usage. This is almost convenience defined, that the customer doesn't have to mess with cash. They can use a credit card, don't have to turn it over to anybody, or they can use the app, pay through the app. Both of those are real removals of barriers in terms of payment processes and speed up the process for the consumer. Innovation is critical. We did that with Pays. We obviously do it with mobile order, mobile pay. One of the things I would say to a marketing person or a CEO, both, when you start thinking about things to do with your business, you don't have to go just to the core element of the business. What's the product or service you offer? If you look at it from the customer's standpoint and think about areas of convenience, how you can get that to them more readily. It may be, as one operator told me about these innovations, they're, quote, outside the box. It doesn't go to the core service. It doesn't go to the core product. It is a method of getting to it that's more convenient to the customer. So this is a way to think about it for a CEO or CMO, it seems to me, in terms of innovation. But the other thing is to look to people, not just in your head or in your organization, look to vendors that you're dealing with, because they can bring great innovation, and they're happy to, because if they can drive your business, they'll make more money. And then the same thing is true with other, not just vendor partners, but other partners, in my case, franchisees. Our innovation with the ice cream program came from a franchisee, and it ended up changing our business altogether. Listen to other people, keep your head up and your eyes open, listen to other people with their ideas. Don't think you've got to come up with all the answers, because you don't, and you can't. That's a couple of points of feedback I think I would have for your CMO.
I love that, Cliff. And when you were running and gunning as a CEO, how did you fit that into your day? What did listening look like? I mean, it sounds like you were hearing from customers and vendors and franchisees and everything. Did you get the chance to have those one-on-ones a lot, or did you solicit through your management team, or kind of what did it look like to get?
Well, a lot of it was formal. In other words, particularly with franchisees, we had regular meetings. I would say every 6 weeks, we either had a franchise advisory council meeting or a franchise council executive committee, which was like 6 franchisees. The larger council was a lot of people. We had regular points of feedback with franchisees who were much closer to the customers than I was. The other methods of feedback, though, even from the customers, a little less direct, but constantly looking at customer surveys, one's taken at store level, one's taken off store level, constantly look at surveys in terms of feedback on service experience, nature of products, so on and so forth. So you have to kind of formalize it into your leadership, I think, because if it, in essence, if it wasn't on my calendar, it wasn't going to happen. You got to make it happen.
You seem like such a curious person, someone that would roll up your sleeves and do any kind of job whatever it takes to get the job done, not be above your title. I guess my question for you on that, as you left the business, you had a love affair with it for so many years, but when you left the business, I guess, and moved on to the role that you have now, is there anything that you left behind that you thought, I'm kind of glad to not have to deal with that anymore?
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, generally, I would say the pressure of the day-to-day stuff. In other words, every morning when you woke up, all of us did. We got sales information for the day before for the whole system, 3,500 stores, billions of dollars. But we got every morning 6 a.m. Boom. Everybody got sales. So you started every day, 7 days a week. You started every day, 6 a.m. looking at yesterday's sales. And you're either relieved because they're good, or you were like, well, what happened yesterday? And, and is this a day part issue? Is it a product issue? So on and so forth. The first morning I woke up after the company had been sold. We had sold on a Friday. I left the office on a Saturday. Saturday and Sunday, not to have to look at sales was extraordinary. I mean, it was. So there's day-to-day pressure like that. I would say more on a day-to-day basis, less at 6 a.m., but every day. To be frank, I mean, it's fun working with people. It's important to lead people, etc. But to be frank, not having to deal with personnel issues was liberating. Once I was no longer in that position, somebody wasn't happy on my problem, So that was a huge transition. Moving on and not having to worry about personnel issues, daily sales information, daily stock price, so on and so forth. It was quite extraordinary, the pressure that was off my shoulders. And it happens, it's so continuous and so pervasive that it's only when you walk away from it that you realize how pervasive and significant it was in the first place.
Cliff, when you're speaking to emerging franchisors or really any kind of business leader, you call out 3 concepts to help leaders level up. Tell us about that. What are those 3 things?
Well, one of the things I do say, and part of this does depend on where you are in your career, and some of it applies particularly to younger folk. And I'd say somebody, particularly if they're in their 20s, coming out of college, earlier in their career, one piece of advice is don't get hung up on specializing. A lot of parents are going to tell a kid this. If you go into college, in essence, they don't ever say learn a trade, but that's kind of what they're saying. get a specialty and get on it so you can market yourself, etc. My thing was get an education, learn how to think critically, learn how to analyze, learn how to speak and present, learn how to write. Learning how to write what you're thinking about. We think it's less important all the time, but my years as a CEO, when I asked somebody to write down what the strategy was, I expected them to be able to, to express it out of their head and put it where the people could understand it. Anyway, learning how to think critically. So this does not mean specialize, and it may mean allow yourself to generalize, get a variety of experiences, and see what works well for you, and then pursue it. In addition to that, as you move into your career, and this can apply even as you move well into your career, keep your head up, keep your eyes open, your head up, your ears open for opportunity, because opportunity will present itself. Don't think you've got to come up with all the opportunities yourself, but keep your head up and your eyes open. And then also, along those same lines, explore different avenues, explore different experiences. Don't think you just got to plan a course and then act on a course, because options are going to come up. And if you got your eyes open and your head up, you can explore those options and pursue them, but only if you're open to exploring rather than, tunneling. So that's kind of the three general ideas that I impart to people when they think about their path prospectively.
So great. Well, thank you for being with us, Cliff. We're, again, so honored to have you. And we will include it in our show notes, too, so that people can double click into some of these episodes. Even from Master of None, you did an episode with the two guys, and I know some will want to hear that. And that's a really incredible story where you just unpacked that whole journey that you had alongside of those guys that we all remember in our lives. And then going forward with Bricks and Clicks, excited to share with our audience whenever your podcast comes out, your book comes out, and we'd love to have you back, and you and Craig even to tell us more about that story that's told in the book. So thank you again. We're honored to have you.
Well, it's an honor for me to be with you, and I look forward to being back with you with Craig and talking about Bricks and Clicks. We'd get a kick out of doing that.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
A kick out of Bricks and Clicks. So how do you like that?
A kick out of Bricks, yes.